Coming up on the Threat Status Podcast, we talk to Alex Martin, the CEO and co-founder of the company Clearspeed, about why the U.S. security vetting process needs to evolve in the 21st century and how trust dominance can help America stay ahead of its adversaries. And then we break down the high-stakes Shangri-La Security Dialogue, the rift between the U.S. and Canada over the Golden Dome, and the moment of truth for President Trump's geopolitical deal-making. Don't forget to go to WashingtonTimes.com and sign up for the daily Threat Status newsletter. Hello and welcome to the Threat Status Podcast. I'm your host, Ben Wolfgang, national security correspondent at the Washington Times. My esteemed co-host Guy Taylor, the national security editor here at the Times, will join me later for a fantastic interview with Alex Martin, co-founder and CEO of Clearspeed. Really fascinating work that company is doing on security vetting, a topic that we actually haven't talked a whole lot about on this show, but that's about to change. Before we get to that, there are a few things on my radar this week, including Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth heading to the Shangri-La Security Dialogue in Singapore. There was speculation that this could be Hegseth's first chance to meet face-to-face with his Chinese counterpart, but it turns out that Beijing is not sending its defense minister, Dong Jun, to the event. This is the first time China hasn't sent a defense minister to the forum since 2019. So, okay, what should we make of this? Well, Beijing does like to send messages with this sort of thing, right? Listeners probably remember former Secretary of State Antony Blinken's visit to China last year, where China gave him a pretty cold reception at the airport, no red carpet, and not the usual high-level delegation to greet him that other foreign dignitaries, including U.S. officials, have received in the past. Is China sending a message here as well at the Shangri-La Dialogue? Is it about the Trump administration's tariffs? Maybe it's about the State Department announcing this week that it's going to start aggressively revoking the visas of Chinese students at U.S. universities. I don't know exactly what it might be about, but I'm curious to see how the U.S. responds. Maybe it's about the Golden Dome missile shield. Some other U.S. adversaries have had some things to say about that, including North Korea, expressing its opposition to the proposed national missile shield that President Trump says will be done, up and running to protect the entire continental U.S. within 3 years before he leaves office. But the project is also getting some criticism a lot closer to home. President Trump this week said that Canada could get free protection under the Golden Dome architecture if it joined the U.S. and became the 51st state. Canada, of course, has said that will never happen. I can never tell exactly how serious President Trump actually is about that, but in the context of the Golden Dome specifically, Canada's ambassador to the U.S., Bob Ray, said this, quote, in another context, this would be called a protection racket, unquote. This is a really interesting subplot to the Golden Dome. As parts of the North American Aerospace Defense Command, or NORAD, the U.S. and Canada obviously, militarily have worked closely together for decades on North American defense. That cooperation needs to continue for the Golden Dome to operate at peak effectiveness. I mean, look, we focused a lot on the show and at our recent Golden Dome for America event hosted by Threat Status on the technology involved in constructing the cutting-edge missile shield that will become the Golden Dome. But equally important, I think, are the North American politics here. I know sometimes, President Trump's attitude toward Canada seems a little tongue-in-cheek. As I said earlier, we're never really sure how serious he is. But having the U.S. and Canada at odds before the Golden Dome has even gotten started, that is serious. That could potentially be a big problem. Those two countries need to cooperate. The U.S. needs to have Canada fully on board with what we're trying to do with the Golden Dome for it to be as successful as everybody envisions that it could be. So that is a really interesting and potentially, I think, it could be a crippling development for the Golden Dome if Canada, were to continue to, some officials at least, express some opposition or some skepticism at the very least about the way the Trump administration is going about the Golden Dome. One final thing here, and that's our sort of weekly President Trump deal watch, if you will. The administration says it's putting the finishing touches on a deal, a proposal at least, to end the Israel-Hamas fighting in the Gaza Strip. President Trump also said this week that a new nuclear deal with Iran could be done in a few weeks And he confirmed that he told Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu to hold off attacking Iranian nuclear sites while those negotiations keep going. And earlier this week, when asked about the Russia-Ukraine peace push, President Trump said, quote, "I'll let you know in about 2 weeks, within 2 weeks," unquote. In other words, we're kind of at the moment of truth right now, in the next couple of days or week or 2 weeks at most, on these three major issues: Israel-Hamas conflict, U.S.-Iran nuclear talks, and the Russia-Ukraine war. How many of those does President Trump have to actually get done for this to be a success in his mind and the sort of the minds of the national security infrastructure and political watchers? All three of them? Or maybe this is a 2 out of 3 ain't bad situation. I'll let listeners be the judge of what the standard should be on all three of these, but it does seem like we're kind of reaching the end of the line, at least as far as the Trump administration is concerned, on all of these matters, all at the same time. And we're joined now by Alex Martin. He's the CEO and co-founder of Clearspeed and a former Marine Recon platoon commander. I met Alex at Soft Week in Tampa, Florida a couple weeks ago, and I found him and the work his company's doing to be so interesting and fascinating that I wanted to bring him on the show. So, Alex, thank you so much for joining us here in the Threat Status Podcast.
Thanks for having me.
Right off the top, in just a minute or two, if you can, give us the quick version of what Clearspeed does and the driving factors that led you personally to start the company almost a decade ago.
Clearspeed, we're fundamentally believe that the next domain of warfare is trust. So this is around risk, not lies, and this is the signal that matters. So Clearspeed was created to provide a technology that enabled end users to really get to trust faster. So others are chasing hardware. There's a lot of goodness in that. We need a lot of great hardware, drones. We need these things, exquisite software. But Clearspeed is absolutely just focused on identifying the problem of human hidden risks at scale. So this is, for me, the tie to the origin story was the loss of a best friend, a dear friend, Captain Warren Frank in Iraq in 2008. And he was working with Iraqi soldiers, and no one had vetted them. Not the fault of the counterintelligence community at all. Not the fault of the technology that they did or didn't have, but this happened. And this left an indelible mark on me, right? And so we looked at this as a team and said, with my co-founders that had lost their mates in Iraq and Afghanistan, and we said, we got to solve this problem. No one's solving this problem. And that's what Clearspeed was created to do.
Okay. I want to dive into the specifics of vetting and what your technology does here in just a minute. But look, you, as you just said, you serve this country overseas. And for the vast majority of listeners who haven't been in those situations, can you take us inside just how important it is when you're deployed abroad, whether it's Afghanistan, Iraq, today we have troops in Africa, elsewhere around the world, how important it is for you to have local allies on the ground who that you can trust? How critical are those individuals to U.S. mission success? And, from your years of experience, can you give us some examples of what they actually help you do on a day-to-day basis?
The partner forces are everything, right? They provide leverage. You usually have smaller units afar, especially in the special operations community. They provide us with really credibility, patrolling and working in the areas that they know better. They provide us with intelligence. They provide us with, all matters of information, learning, and fundamentally, it's about partnership. You cannot do your job as well without partner forces. So they are mission critical. In my experience, working in, throughout Southwest, Southeast Asia, the Middle East, Africa, you simply can't do the work that you're tasked with doing without the partner forces. And so the challenge then is instantly, if you can't do the work without them, but you need to leverage them in a way where trust is an enabler, how do you establish that trust at the offset, right? And the current technologies you're provided, lie detection technologies, you're not racking around a polygraph, on your rucksack, right? And so there's no way to get out trust quickly. So what you end up doing is you have this exchange between the security of you and your Marines or your sailors or your soldiers versus the speed at which you can get to mission. And that trade-off happens every single day around the world and has been for 25 years. In these wars and beyond.
One more quickly, Alex, before I bring Guy into the conversation here. On your website, Clearspeed says it was founded to, quote, disrupt the vetting industry, unquote. So, whether we're talking about contractors who need to be cleared or, hires for the federal government or the military or foreign allies, what specifically kind of, United States wide is the vetting process was getting wrong or still is getting wrong today? What are we missing here with this?
So again, first of all, just to say a lot of progress has been made and is being made. It's not like no one is doing anything or thinking about this problem. A lot of well-intentioned, brilliant people are working on this. The problem is no one's trying to solve it where we believe the disruption needs to occur. So the fundamental premise here is, look, there's lie detection and there's risk assessment. And the shift from lie detection technology to risk assessment or trust technology is fundamental. It hasn't happened, and that's what we're here to lead in. So we're not in the business of lie detection. This is kind of a really an outdated model based on confrontation and judgment. No AI is going to solve the problem of lie, no lie, right? Now they're going to help people get closer to understanding risk. That's where we come in. That's the difference. That shifts it all on its head. And so in the US, right, the vetting of people includes an ecosystem of data points, leveraging, technology to understand who this person is. Then it funnels through a process where ultimately, whether there's a credibility assessment function, which is, parenthetically lie detection, and then a human making a judgment on those outcomes of binary lie, no lie. Like that's how it works today. Overseas, you don't have the benefit. You're not running a background check in Mogadishu. You're not running a credit score in Nairobi. You're not running, an array of sensing technology of whether this person is a bad guy or not. You're running a lot of intel on them. You've got human and SIGINT, and you've got OSINT, and you've got incredible amounts of data feeding into these really smart humans who are then saying, hey, team, there's some risk here. But it's not there yet, right? It just hasn't pushed through where the innovation has met the need on the edge. At the enterprise, they're doing a great job of understanding where the fraud is and they're processing people. And that's another part of our business. And we're a part of that movement too. But here, you really just understand whether it's here in the US or overseas, you don't need a truth cop. You need a trust signal, right? And you need to go beyond sensing to action. And the action is around stepping forward and allowing speed to become your security and then pulling back and allowing those humans to then dive deeper into the problem.
Alex, it's Guy Taylor. I think you were starting to just get into this, but can we talk a little more about what it actually looks like? Technically, what Clearspeed actually is. If we're in the room as Clearspeed vetting is taking place, what is your voice tech actually doing? What is it measuring?
Right, sure. So let's just start at the very outset. It was designed to first pre-screen tens, hundreds, thousands, tens of thousands of people. So think first order touch. That's like the problem. Lots of people that you need to get through a process of vetting or assessment of risk down to a human makes a decision. So you need a
But it's like a cell phone, or it's like a list of questions.
So it's a list of questions delivered through a phone, telephonically, through a tablet, any number of means. But ultimately, the human being engages with the software, not a human, right? So there's an unbiased approach to touching everyone the same way in terms of this exchange. It's a series of simple yes or no questions in any language. And what's happening is those questions animate the fight or flight response, right? And there's a reaction in all humans that is detectable, quantifiable, measurable. Clearspeed quantifies those reactions and then measures them on a scale of low to high. That then serves two purposes with three elements of value. The first purpose is we give you a data signal that you could get elsewhere, but would be really expensive and time consuming, meaning you can run everyone through a lie detector and make a decision of good, bad, but it doesn't scale. So you use us so you get to green fast. The second element of our data point is we provide you a red, yellow, or green that doesn't exist on the planet, because if there's no pattern, no AI is going to find it with a behavioral model, right? So we're able to say, hey, here's an alert. And because we don't know the person's intent, we don't understand, we don't want to understand intent or lie. What we understand is human reaction to a question, meaning follow up, like do the normal thing here, but do it on this smaller subset of population. And so in this way, we become, through this deliver of this automated questionnaire, right? We become a triage tool, a resource optimization tool in the three buckets of value that we have. One is we're saving time and money. The second is we're increasing action rate of the counterintelligence folks, the human folks, or the operators. And the third is we're actually elevating customer experience. Because remember, if I'm in Malaysia, Indonesia, Afghanistan, wherever I am with my team, my position of starting with trust isn't, hey, sit before a 4 hour polygraph. Hey, I'm going to interrogate you for 8 hours with a linguist that may be from a different tribe and there's confrontation and bias there. No, no, no. You're going to take a quick 3-minute automated questionnaire, and we're going to get you on the way. We're going to patrol. And if you alert, no problem. We still want to dig in a little bit. That's what we're doing, right? It's the automated deployment of voice technology to illuminate risk signal that's uncapturable elsewhere.
So if you're a job candidate and Clearspeed Tech flags something in your interview, does that harm your prospects in any way? Is that kept on a permanent record or file somewhere?
Great question. And let me use the insurance industry because this is a great example of our no harm application. Okay. So if a claim runs through, pick your big carrier, you submit a claim, and right now we're going to look at you. We don't know what your gender, your race, your religion, your age, your credit score. We don't know anything. All we know is you're a human taking a call. Now, the identity verification, this is done on the front end through our carriers, right? You pass through our interview, you get paid like instantly. Like you get paid same day, same hour, same minute, next day, whatever the carrier wants to do. But you get paid. You get moved through. Now, if we alert, the normal thing that would have happened before Clearspeed happens, meaning someone calls Guy or Ben and says, "Hey, Ben, I noticed here that you had, an alert here on this thing. I just want to help you get this through. Can you please submit this? Can you please give up?" So you then go through the process that is normally applied to everyone. And if in that process it turns out that your vehicle was in a crash, but you didn't have the Callaway golf clubs in the trunk, well then guess what? That's not Clearspeed. That's the fact that you actually had maybe some element of soft fraud in your claim. But that is only when we are followed up by a human process where the facts and the evidence derive. If not, tie goes to the runner. Guy, it doesn't go on any of your record. You get your job. It's simply a way to have a conversation.
This is, to me, one of the more interesting examples of humans moving quickly to implement sort of this new advanced tech that's out there. So much gets talked about when you get to rubber meeting the road of here's something that's actually happening and being used. Can we dive a little deeper into the AI portion of this? There's a question hanging over AI discussions. We've gotten into it on the podcast a number of times that centers on whether AI models will develop their own biases or value systems. There's a whole other issue of AI systems creating hallucinations. We recently had Dan Hendricks, the director of the Center for AI Safety, on the show. He talked about how some high-level AI models value African lives over American lives, for example, or they make decisions about what kinds of people should rank higher than others. Could those dynamics come into play?
Yeah, it's a great question, guys. So we are a deterministic model, not a behavioral model. And it's because of this that the industry in banking, insurance, and in defense and security is really running towards us because we have none of this. So we actually are an AI enabled, but not AI powered, not an AI engine, right? So we can do this completely free of AI. For example, in the EU for hiring, as you mentioned, right, you can't apply AI and we don't need to. So think of us more like a medical device, right? Like the ability or a metal detector in the airport. What it's doing is it's sensing an anomaly. Okay, that anomaly, whether it's the magnetometer or whether it's any technology that's having an application for blood pressure, right? What it's doing is getting that reading. In our case, it's detecting an anomaly in that response, free of AI, right? So we do not know gender, race, religion, age, anything about the person at all. The data that we have is non-biometric in nature, meaning you can't tag 300 milliseconds of speech capture back to Guy or Ben. And so that makes us very attractive, right? From a data privacy, from a fairness, from us being able to understand that currently, the bias is the bias-free approach that we have is that the questions are asked the same way to every person the same time over and over again. And what we're detecting is universal in nature, right? And in this way, it makes a big impact. We use AI simply to apply the risk evaluation. So we used to do that with a human, right? And the human would then be able to do, using our proprietary scoring model, they'd be able to do the labeling of the response. Think of it as the green, yellow, red. Now the AI does green, yellow, red. That's all, right? It is just taking what is the output from the measurement of the signal that we detect and quantify, and it's saying that's it. And so in that way, I think that's why there's a huge rush to us in the market because it applies the same way to every person. And it's really important when you see the metrics come out, which is, wow, I wasn't going to hire this person because they're in this area that's close to Al-Shabaab. And so I think that might be at risk. Well, put them through our technology. And let's see, 9.9 times out of 10, it isn't the case, right? So because there's this perception of risk. Or let's say I'm, a black guy from East Oakland and I'm 25 years old with a bad credit score. Immediately I show up to the insurance carrier as being high risk for fraud. That's totally unfair, right? Totally unfair. And now we were able to go through a process without that bias. So that's why I'm so excited about the integration of our, trust signal into the infrastructure that right now has a lot of problems with what you're talking about.
Alex, one final thing to wrap up here, bring us back to sort of the big picture perspective. One of the long running themes on this show is the intersection of the government and tech, Silicon Valley. And you're now a businessman doing business with the federal government. And by your own definition, you're trying to disrupt things. So I'm curious if you can walk me through from when your company was founded in 2016 to today, how has the federal government changed or evolved in terms of its willingness to embrace new things, to embrace disruptions that can potentially help it do business better for the American people? In other words, is the ground more fertile today than it was 5 or even 3 or 2 years ago for a company to come in and completely change how we do, in this case, vetting and security checks?
It is. And we were fortunate enough to start in the special operations community and carry through. And this is where a group of folks, these men and women, look at the problem differently. They have to, right? And so they were able to look at things and say, we're facing the challenges. We're trying to buy down a lot of this risk where human lives are at stake, where it's mission critical. And so we're willing to go out on the risk curve and adopt a new technology, a new approach. Now, however, back in Washington, and in Silicon Valley, there's a cart and buggy, approach to how we're attacking this problem, right? Hey, this is another credibility assessment tool. This is voice stress 2.0. It's none of those things, right? This is the different kind of approach. We think about the evolution of you have to prove it, and then once you prove it, what are the incentives of those who have the job to make change or to affect that change? And by and large, in the past, there hasn't been many. And you have people coming with all of their pre-established, preconceived notions about how to attack the problem, and then we're something new and different. That makes people uncomfortable. And it made people uncomfortable until you keep showing the value, until you keep putting it in the hands of the operators and the folks that have the hard problem to sell. And we'll say things like, okay, if this isn't an option, then send me an army of polygraphers to help me solve my problem. And they couldn't. And so by just maintaining persistence with those that needed it, what we've been able to do now is open up the aperture and say, and the ground right now is incredibly fertile for innovation. The market, the complexity in the market and the global volatility is the rise of peer threats like China. Everyone's saying we have to do something about this problem. In the commercial industry, the pain was so great that they're willing to take a risk on new technologies like ours. And when they see the ROI, they go, incredible. And they actually call us a security product. This is fascinating. We're not an insurance product in insurance. They call us a security product. Why? We protect their customers, we protect their brand, we protect their bottom line. But in the security industry, we're actually akin to an insurance product. Use us to get a data point to buy down risk, to do your job, to maintain the edge, to maintain the offensive, to deploy your resources more appropriately, people and technology, and to win, right? And so in this way, this is really the introduction, and this is where the disruption comes in. This is the introduction of a new warfighting function. This is the introduction of trust dominance. We're in the lead of pioneering this new warfighting function for the DoD. You got air, land, cyberspace. Trust is a battle space. It always has been, but now more so than ever, in this modern hybrid conflicts that we see, the ability to rapidly assess who can be trusted is a strategic advantage. It's also a tactical advantage. And whether it's vetting local partners, securing supply chains, de-risking insider threats, trust dominance is about operating with confidence in uncertainty, which, oh, by the way, is where we have to operate. And we're building this technology to make that possible. Silicon Valley has lost their imagination. By and large, there's a few, but mostly they have. And what they're doing is they're following the money as opposed to getting ahead of where the problem is. And everyone in Silicon Valley is obsessed with drones and robotics and hardware. And they should be, because we need those things. Those are important. But the real risk is in our people, bad actors who don't look like enemies, the human threat that's the soft underbelly of national security, Chinese threat financing and influence. This is all being overlooked. So we're filling that gap. This is not building another sensor. This is building a signal that reveals hidden risk where all these traditional systems are failing. And this is where we're going to have our biggest impact.
Alex Martin, CEO and co-founder of Clearspeed. Thank you so much for joining us here in the Threat Status Podcast. Really appreciate your time.
Thanks for having me.
And it's time now for Threats of the Week, our weekly segment here in the show where Guy and I each identify a threat, whether it's here at home domestically or in some corner of the world that we think is impacting U.S. national security right now this week as you all are listening to the show. And my threat of the week is Chinese cyber attacks, but specifically ones that can take advantage of the functions that we use on our phones, tablets, and computers just about every day. I'm talking about Google Calendar, for example, which I rely on, and I suspect a lot of our listeners do as well. But apparently it's now a potential target for China-backed hacking groups to use as they try to implant malware on the computer systems of U.S. government agencies. Google Threat Intelligence this week revealed in a pretty lengthy and detailed blog post that back in October, Google researchers said they found an exploited U.S. government website used to host malware, which was dubbed Tough Progress. Google says the malware was ultimately delivered through spear phishing emails containing bogus files. Now, this is a bit complex and maybe even a little bit confusing, so I'd encourage you to go read our story on the Washington Times website that offers a lot more detail on exactly how this whole thing worked. But in a nutshell, Google says the hacking group APT41 used Google Calendar for command and control. Once the malware payload was delivered to a user, the hackers gained access to that user's Google Calendar and could essentially read and write events inside of the calendar. We're all familiar with how that works. But then the Tough Progress malware created a hard-coded calendar event containing data collected from the host, and it was then encrypted. The hackers would then use that malware to decrypt the data before encrypting it again and writing it into a different calendar event. In other words, they were able to find a pretty convoluted, but I guess effective way to take control of the user's Google Calendar function and then get inside of the system through that. It was their entryway. Since then, Google says it has eliminated the hacker-controlled calendars, but still, I mean, this kind of thing is terrifying. It's a reminder of just how much vulnerability there can be on these apps and programs we use every day to basically just live our lives in the United States of America and all around the world, and that's why it's my threat of the week. And with that, thank you so much. Another great week on the podcast. A big thanks to Alex Martin from Clearspeed for walking us through the issue of U.S. security vetting. And a big thanks to all of you, our listeners. Please go ahead, hit that subscribe button, share with all of your friends, and we'll be back next week on the Threat Status Podcast.